So, in terms of voter turnout, there are demographic differences. Demographic differences. That brings up the vocab word demographic. It has to do with measuring people. That's what the Greek words mean. Demo for people, graph for measuring. So how do you measure people? Well, one way is how old they are. So different demographics of age vote differently. You know, when I was young, I thought of the hippies of the 1960s, the anti-war movement, the protesters. Most of them were college age. Even in those days, a smaller percentage of young adults vote than any other age group of adults. People in their late teens and early 20s did not vote in as large a number as people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and so forth. In fact, the tendency is the younger you are, the less likely you are to vote, and the more likely you are to vote every year you get older. Why? Well, you can come up with all sorts of reasons. Even when young people were liable to be drafted to fight in the Vietnam War, it was still a challenge to get some people to the polls. Young people are interested in other things, perhaps. I don't know. Was I a young person once? That's a good question. Young people tend to be interested in other things than politics. I was a weirdo in that I liked politics from basically the time I was a fifth grader. I was interested in it. But most young people aren't. But the older you get, the more personal experience you have with how politics in the local, state, regional, national, and international level will affect your life. We are affected now by an international pandemic, the coronavirus, COVID-19. And that's affecting us, but that's not the only case. The older you get, the more experience you have buying a home, having children, raising a family, being married, hopefully not in that order. The more experience you have doing a job, making money, climbing up the ladder, hopefully. The more experience you have with people, and maybe yourself, serving in the military or working as a first responder. And the more experience you have doing things like that, the more you understand politics is not just for other people. Politics can affect and change your life. So the older people get, the more interested they get in politics, at least in voting. The older you get also, the more old people are likely to have children or grandchildren. And they want to do their best to make the world safe and as good and healthy as possible for their kids and grandkids. So the older you are, the more you tend to vote. But there are many different demographics. There is gender. Are you male? Are you female? There is race, ethnicity, religion. Are you married? For example, women. Women who are unmarried and not religious and live in cities are overwhelmingly liberal Democrat. Overwhelmingly. Women who have any of those factors changed are much more moderate or conservative. Married women tend to be much more conservative than unmarried women. Rural women tend to be much more conservative than urban women, and women who are active participants in their religion tend to be much more conservative than women who are not. So also, do you have children or not? That also affects. Women without children tend to be more liberal. Women with children, more moderate. Not conservative exactly, but more moderate. So one of the ways that political campaigns and politicians look at people as groups to appeal to is these demographic, the way you measure people. Age, gender, are you married? Are you religious? Are you urban or rural? How much money do you make? How much education do you have? Do you have military service or not? All of these things are number crunched by political experts who are trying to come up with propaganda that's going to appeal to different groups. For example, if you're in town and you want to raise the school budget to spend more money in the schools, say to get a one-on-one laptop for every student in your schools over a certain age, you've got to sell that to a public that includes people who don't have kids, people who had kids but they're adults now, so they're no longer in the schools and they're not going to personally benefit, and people who genuinely disagree with the idea, and people who have kids in non-public schools. So you've got to find a way, if you want to raise that school budget, to get people who agree with raising the school budget to the polls and to vote your way. And that involves harmonizing your propaganda with the demographic groups that you're going after. Next time, we'll talk about how people participate in the political process.